Nothing is wrong with you. That's the trap. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, what's wrong with me? Perhaps it was after scrolling through social media, seeing everyone's highlight reels, their perfect lives, their flawless appearances. Or maybe it was after a rejection, a failure, or simply during those quiet moments of introspection when you feel like you don't quite measure up. That voice inside your head whispers, everyone else seems to have it figured out. Everyone else seems whole. What's wrong with me? Today, we're exploring a radical idea that might just set you free. Nothing is wrong with you. And that's precisely the trap. The world has masterfully constructed what philosophers call the perfection illusion, a carefully crafted mirage that suggests there exists some ideal state of being that we should all aspire to reach. This illusion manifests in countless ways: the perfect body, the perfect career, the perfect relationship, the perfect mind, the perfect life. And when we inevitably fall short of these impossible standards, we conclude that something must be wrong with us. There must be some fundamental flaw, some brokenness that needs fixing. We become consumers in the marketplace of self-improvement, desperately trying to purchase wholeness. But what if this entire framework is the actual problem? What if nothing was ever wrong with you in the first place? The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This wisdom points to something profound. Our suffering often comes not from our actual circumstances, but from our judgment about those circumstances. When we judge ourselves as broken, we create our own prison. Consider for a moment the Buddhist concept of original wholeness. This philosophy suggests that we are born complete, inherently worthy, inherently enough. There is no missing piece to find, no wound to heal, no brokenness to fix. The true you, beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the self-judgment, is already whole. But if this is true, why don't we feel it? Why does the sense that something is wrong with us persist so strongly? This is where we encounter the first trap, the self-improvement paradox. The more we try to fix ourselves, the more we reinforce the belief that we are broken. Every attempt at self-improvement can unconsciously strengthen the very belief that caused our suffering in the first place, that something is fundamentally wrong with us. Think about it this way. If you were to approach a child and constantly tell them what's wrong with them, constantly push them to improve, to be better, to fix themselves, what would happen? Over time, that child would internalize the message that they are not good enough as they are. They would develop a core belief that something is inherently wrong with them. Now consider that this is precisely what many of us do to ourselves every day. We have internalized the critical voice, the demanding taskmaster, the relentless judge. We have become our own tormentors. The philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau once wrote, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." While Rousseau was speaking of social and political constraints, his words apply equally to the psychological chains we forge for ourselves. Chains of self-judgment, self-criticism, and the persistent belief that something is wrong with us. So what's the alternative? If self-improvement just reinforces our sense of brokenness, should we just give up on growth? Not at all. This brings us to a critical distinction that can change everything: the difference between self-improvement and self-acceptance. Self-improvement says, there is something wrong with me that needs to be fixed. Self-acceptance says, I am whole as I am, and from this place of wholeness, I can grow. Do you see the radical difference? One approach starts from lack, the other from fullness. One starts from brokenness, the other from wholeness. One is rooted in fear, the other in love. The German philosopher Hegel introduced the concept of dialectical thinking, the idea that growth happens not through simple opposition, but through integration. Applied to our inner lives, this suggests that true transformation doesn't come from rejecting who we are now in favor of some idealized future self. Rather, it comes from fully embracing who we are now and allowing natural evolution to unfold from that place of acceptance. Let's make this concrete with an example. Imagine someone who struggles with social anxiety. The self-improvement approach might say, social anxiety is bad. There's something wrong with me for feeling this way. I need to fix this broken part of myself. The self-acceptance approach would say, this anxiety is here right now. It's part of my experience. I can hold it with kindness, understand it, and work with it rather than against it. There's nothing wrong with me for feeling this way. Paradoxically, it's often the second approach that leads to more meaningful change. When we stop fighting ourselves, when we drop the belief that something is wrong with us, we create the conditions for authentic transformation. The existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre spoke of radical freedom, the idea that we are condemned to be free, to make choices that define who we are. But this freedom becomes meaningful only when we stop trying to conform to external standards of what we should be, and instead embrace our authentic selves. Here's where we encounter the second trap, the authenticity paradox. In our quest to find our authentic selves, we often look outward for models and examples. We try to emulate others who seem authentic, not realizing that true authenticity can't be copied. It must emerge from within. The psychologist Carl Rogers observed that many of us develop what he called conditions of worth, internalized rules about what makes us worthy of love and acceptance. We learn early in life that certain parts of ourselves are acceptable, while others must be hidden, denied, or changed. Over time, we lose touch with our true selves as we try to conform to these conditions of worth. Rogers believed that healing happens when we experience unconditional positive regard, being seen, accepted, and valued exactly as we are, without any need to change. While we often look for this acceptance from others, the most powerful form comes from within, unconditional self-acceptance. But here's the crucial insight. This isn't about accepting harmful behaviors or giving up on growth. Rather, it's about recognizing that growth emerges naturally from acceptance, not from rejection of who we are now. The Zen concept of beginner's mind offers wisdom here. When we approach ourselves with curiosity rather than judgment, with wonder rather than criticism, we create space for genuine transformation. We stop trying to force ourselves into predetermined molds and instead allow our unique unfolding. This brings us to perhaps the deepest trap of all, the trap of comparison. In comparing ourselves to others, we fall into what the philosopher Kierkegaard called despair of possibility, the endless, exhausting pursuit of what could be rather than an embrace of what is. Social media has amplified this trap to unprecedented levels. We're constantly exposed to carefully curated versions of others' lives, achievements, appearances, and happiness. With each scroll, with each click, the message is reinforced. Look at what you're missing. Look at how you don't measure up. Something must be wrong with you. But here's the truth. Comparison is not just the thief of joy. It's the architect of the illusion that something is wrong with you. When you compare your complete reality, with all its messiness, complexity, and imperfection, to someone else's highlight reel, you're setting yourself up for a rigged game that you can never win. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote about the sickness unto death, a despair that comes from not being true to oneself, from trying to be someone other than who you authentically are. This sickness manifests as a persistent sense that something is wrong, that you are somehow deficient or inadequate. The cure for this sickness isn't more self-improvement, more striving, more fixing. The cure is radical self-acceptance, embracing yourself exactly as you are right now, with all your perceived flaws, failures, and imperfections. But this is easier said than done. We live in a culture that profits from our sense of inadequacy. The beauty industry, the fitness industry, the self-help industry, all thrive on perpetuating the belief that something is wrong with you that their product can fix. Every advertisement whispers, sometimes shouts, "You're not good enough, but we can help." To break free from this trap requires a revolutionary act, rejecting the premise that something is wrong with you in the first place. The philosopher Alan Watts captured this beautifully when he said, You're under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. This isn't a call to constant reinvention, but rather an invitation to drop the fixed narrative of brokenness that many of us carry. In each moment, you can choose to see yourself through eyes of judgment or eyes of love. Let's explore another powerful philosophical perspective. Martin Heidegger's concept of authentic being. Heidegger suggested that most people live in what he called the they-self, a mode of existence where we conform to social expectations and norms without questioning them. We absorb society's messages about what constitutes a good life, a successful person, a worthy human being. To break free from the they-self and embrace our authentic self, we must engage in what Heidegger called resoluteness, the courage to define our own values and live according to them, regardless of social pressure. This resoluteness begins with trap, believing that something is wrong with you, keeps you forever seeking, forever striving, forever feeling inadequate. Breaking free from this trap doesn't mean giving up on growth or change. It means recognizing that true transformation emerges not from self-rejection, but from self-acceptance. As the psychologist Carl Rogers observed, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. This isn't just a nice sentiment, it's a profound psychological truth. When we stop fighting ourselves, when we drop the narrative that something is wrong with us, we create the conditions for authentic growth and transformation. So where do we go from here? How do we break free from the trap of believing something is wrong with us? It begins with awareness, noticing when you've fallen into the trap, when you're operating from the assumption that you're somehow broken or deficient. This awareness itself is revolutionary. It creates a space between you and the belief, allowing you to see it as a lens through which you're perceiving yourself rather than an objective truth. From awareness comes choice. In each moment, you can choose to relate to yourself from judgment or from compassion. You can choose to see your perceived flaws as evidence of brokenness or as aspects of your humanity. You can choose to approach your challenges from a place of self-criticism or self-kindness. These choices may seem small, but they're profound. Over time, they reshape your relationship with yourself and your experience. They free you from the trap that has caused so much unnecessary suffering. Remember, the belief that something is wrong with you isn't truth. It's a perspective. And perspectives can change. You can drop the lens of judgment and pick up a lens of compassion. You can shift from seeing yourself as a problem to be solved to a mystery to be lived. This isn't about denying reality or avoiding responsibility for your actions. It's about freeing yourself from a framework that has kept you trapped in cycles of self-judgment and self-rejection. It's about recognizing that the very premise that something is wrong with you is itself the trap. When you stop trying to fix yourself, when you drop the belief that something is wrong with you, something remarkable happens. Authentic growth becomes possible. Not growth driven by shame or fear or the desperate need to be different, but growth that unfolds naturally from acceptance and self-compassion. As you move through the world, notice when you fall into the trap of believing something is wrong with you. Notice the circumstances that trigger this belief, the voices you've internalized, the standards by which you're judging yourself. And then, with kindness and curiosity, question whether these judgments serve your well-being and growth. The truth is, you were never broken. The parts of yourself that you've judged as wrong or deficient are simply aspects of your humanity. Your sensitivity, your anxiety, your anger, your sadness, your struggles. These aren't evidence that something is wrong with you. They're evidence that you're human, navigating a complex world with the resources available to you. The philosopher Nietzsche wrote about the concept of amor fati, love of fate, love of what is. This isn't passive resignation, but active embrace of life in all its complexity. It's about saying yes to what is, including all the parts of yourself that you've previously rejected or judged. This embrace doesn't mean you can't or won't change. Paradoxically, it's often when we fully accept ourselves that the most profound transformation becomes possible. Not transformation driven by self-rejection, but transformation that emerges naturally from self-acceptance. The trap, believing that something is wrong with you, has caused so much unnecessary suffering. But you can break free. You can drop the narrative of brokenness and embrace a different possibility, that you are whole, complete, and worthy exactly as you are. This isn't the end of growth or change. In fact, it's the beginning of authentic transformation. Transformation rooted not in shame or fear, but in love and acceptance. So remember, whenever that voice inside whispers, "What's wrong with me?" recognize, it is the trap. Nothing is wrong with you. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a human being, with all the complexity, contradiction, and beauty that entails. You are enough just as you are. And from this place of enoughness, true growth becomes possible. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe. As we close, I invite you to sit with this question. What might become possible if you drop the belief that something is wrong with you? What energy might be liberated? What authenticity might emerge? What joy might be reclaimed? The journey of self-acceptance isn't always easy, but it's profoundly liberating. And it begins with recognizing that the belief that something is wrong with you isn't truth. It's a trap. A trap you can choose to step out of moment by moment, day by day. You were born whole, and nothing has changed that fundamental truth. The path back to that wholeness begins with embracing yourself exactly as you are right now. Recognizing that the standards by which we've been judging ourselves may not actually be our own. Ask yourself, whose voice is it that tells you something is wrong with you? Is it truly your voice? Or is it an internalized voice from parents, teachers, peers, media, or society at large? Often, when we trace the source of our self-judgment, we find it originated outside ourselves. The psychologist Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are by integrating all parts of yourself, including those aspects you've rejected or denied. Jung believed that many of our psychological struggles stem from disowning parts of ourselves that don't fit our ideal self-image. This brings us to a profound truth. The parts of yourself that you've judged as wrong or broken are often the very parts that, when embraced, hold the key to your wholeness. Your sensitivity, your anxiety, your anger, your sadness, your perceived weaknesses, these aren't flaws to be eliminated, but aspects of your humanity to be integrated. The poet Rumi expressed this beautifully when he wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you. Your perceived brokenness, your struggles, your pain, these aren't evidence that something is wrong with you. They are the very gateways to deeper understanding, compassion, and wisdom." Consider the Japanese art of kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold. Rather than hiding the cracks, kintsugi highlights them, transforming what might be seen as damage into something beautiful. This art form embodies a profound philosophy. Imperfection isn't something to hide or fix, it's something to honor as part of the unique history and beauty of an object. What if we applied this same philosophy to ourselves? What if, instead of trying to hide or fix our perceived flaws, we honored them as integral parts of our unique human experience? This doesn't mean we shouldn't strive to grow, learn, and evolve, but it does mean that this growth stems not from a place of self-rejection, but from a place of self-embrace. True change happens not when we fight against who we are, but when we fully accept ourselves and allow natural evolution to unfold. The philosopher Michel Foucault wrote extensively about how power operates through normalization, the process by which certain ways of being are established as normal, while others are deemed abnormal or deviant. We internalize these norms and begin to police ourselves, constantly monitoring whether we measure up to these arbitrary standards. Breaking free from this self-policing requires what Foucault called practices of freedom, conscious efforts, to question and resist the normalized standards that constrain us. One such practice is to ask, whenever you feel that something is wrong with you, according to whom, by what standard, who benefits from my belief that I am somehow deficient? Often you'll find that the standards by which you're judging yourself serve interests